Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Nate Loewentheil and I'm the Executive Director of the Roosevelt Institution. I want to thank you all for coming today and joining us in the lovely Shannon Language Center. I want to thank in particular everyone who helped make this day possible. Joe Eastman up here is the President of the Hunter College chapter, and Lynn Wolf from Center for Social Inclusion, and also Hunter College for giving us this space today. So thank you all. This is really terrific. The Roosevelt Institution is a national student think tank. We're a group of about 70 chapters around the country that get students to work on public policy issues, leveraging the intellectual resources of their colleges and universities. So we work with local and state legislators, with community organizations, with government agencies, to provide sound policy analysis and innovative and progressive ideas for public policy. We were only founded about 3 years ago, and we spread very rapidly. We have a chapter here at Hunter, of course, which is great, brand new but very, very strong. Chapters at University of Georgia, Wisconsin, Vermont, California, basically all over the map. And we publish a series of policy journals and white papers, hold conferences and symposiums, and help educate students about how to be more informed and active citizens. And so in your folders, I think you have a copy of one of our journals, and I'd be glad to tell you a little bit more about Roosevelt later today. We're here today to explore the issue of diversity in public policy, how our government policies affect communities of color, and how they take race or fail to take race into consideration. Historically, public policy has adversely affected minorities in this country. Often the people who most needed a hand up from our public institutions. Some of this effect was implicit, so the federal highway acts of the 50s and 60s really led to a serious divestment in cities, which where many minorities in this country live, as well as very explicit racial issues in public policy. So if you look at the history of redlining, that was a practice where the federal government would not give mortgages and would put less investment into neighborhoods that were racially integrated. And so, historically over time, our country has not done very much to help, low-income people and communities of color, with the economic problems that they face. And up until today, policy reform often has racial overtones. And so Reagan and the whole welfare queens, icon, as well as Bill Clinton's reform in the 1990s, really played on racial stereotypes in a pretty negative way. And today there's still plenty of overt racism. I mean, you don't have to go very far to see that. But there's also structural racism, and that's what we're really here to discuss today. And structural racism is really the notion that the way that our country is structured, its institutions, its systems, really benefit the dominant segments of our society by race and by income. And that we need to be more aware of the barriers that face the most marginalized members of our communities, kind of bring those to light, and to, particular for this conference, talk about how public policy can help address some of those issues. And there's a lot of room to improve public policy to stop it not only adversely affecting marginalized members of our society, but to really help support them and to provide security and opportunity and equality for all members of our society. I think there's a tendency to ignore race or to pretend that it's not a major issue. I think those of you who saw Barack Obama's speech last week about race, he really captured this tension in our society where we don't want to talk about these problems. We want to kind of ignore them and put them behind closed doors. But that we have to be intentional as a country to address these issues. We have to recognize them and then take active steps forward. For our part at the Roosevelt Institution, we're trying to address this in a couple different ways. First, just by raising consciousness about structural racism and what we can do to combat it through events like this, through publications, through journals. We're also working to bring in more diverse voices into public policy. So I think one major problem when you're talking about public policy formation is that overwhelmingly the people who are writing public policy or implementing it are white. I mean, there's just an incredible lack of diversity in the policymaking process. And so this summer we're running a program called the Roosevelt Academy, which is providing very generous stipends to bring in low-income students and students of color from all over the country to Washington to work in think tanks and to kind of get them on a track towards public policy for the future. And thirdly, we're really helping our students to just keep this kind of mode of analysis in mind as they write public policy, to be aware of racial disparities and structural racism as they're writing public policy, whether it's from an after-school program at the local town council or school board, or talking about energy policy at the national level. And that's really the goal of today's conference, is to get all of you to be more aware of this kind of way of thinking about public policy and the institutions and systems in our country. This is meant to be a really informal day. I hope all of you will pause me and ask questions, and pause and ask speakers questions. Really roll up your sleeves. We all are wearing our Sweet Roosevelt t-shirts to keep it pretty informal. And we have a really good day. We're going to have a couple of introductory remarks, which we'll get to in a moment, and then a workshop as a group, and then we're going to go into some breakout sessions, and I'll kind of key you in as we move forward in the day. But I'm really glad you're all here, and I hope you're all ready to learn and really think deeply about some of these problems, because I think there's a lot of room for